So, in the case of the Hetch Valley, the anthropocentric considerations won out over the preservation of the natural environment, and the people of San Francisco got access to water. But even if you subscribe to the anthropocentric view, there's another question in play. Was it their water to take? Because after all, San Francisco was not the only city in that region that might have reasonably laid claim to that water. And the reality also is that Native American communities had not only been relying on the valley's resources for thousands of years, but also actively stewarding the valley through controlled bushfires that brought about the growth of beneficial shrubs and grasses, which drew wildlife to the region. So even if you buy into this view, this anthropocentric view that human considerations should get prioritized over the biocentric considerations, which humans get to benefit, and who gets to make decisions about how natural resources are distributed. Enter environmental justice, which is defined as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people in environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Environmental justice means that no one is excluded from consideration and having a voice in decision making, regardless of their race, ethnicity, income, or other characteristics. Everyone deserves the same amount of environmental protection, and everyone deserves the same access to resources. There are many ways that environmental justice struggles manifest, but one of them that we've hinted at with the Hetch Valley case is the invasion and forcing out of indigenous peoples by colonial powers. Indigenous peoples are defined as the historical occupants of a region, here in the US called Native Americans or Alaska Natives or Native Hawaiians, depending upon where you're talking about. However, there are indigenous peoples all across the globe, including the Inuit in the Arctic, rainforest tribes in Brazil, the Aboriginal peoples in Australia, the Berbers of Northern Africa, and countless others. The invasion of indigenous lands by colonial powers has resulted in the exploitation of the lands and ecosystems that they previously depended on and stewarded. For so many indigenous peoples, their culture and their way of life was and is tied up symbiotically with the land. And so these colonial takeovers have transformed their way of life and threatened their culture. Another example beyond the Hetch Hetchy Valley is the push to drill for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge on the northern coast of Alaska. So this region is home to an indigenous group called the Gwich'in, whose way of life is entirely dependent on the herds of caribou that also occupy the region. And allowing the area to be opened up to oil drilling would destroy their livelihood. So here we see a member of the Gwich'in Steering Committee speaking in protest of the proposal to expand oil drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Environmental justice principles hold that voices of these stakeholders must be respected and considered in environmental decision making.